pie that goes into making babies. Now, the important thing about the pie analogy is that the pie is a finite size. So to make one slice of the pie bigger, you inevitably make other slices of the pie smaller. And so when we allocate resources to these 4 different functions, they involve trade-offs. And to me, that was the interesting thing. That's where allocating more, for example, to reproduction means taking away from maintenance, or taking away from growth, or taking away from storage, and changing the way you might perform in the future. And so what life history theory predicts is the optimal allocation of resources to these different slices in response to features of the environment. Now, a very important feature of the environment is external sources of mortality. So one prediction that life history theory made was how the life history should evolve in response to living in a place where your chances of surviving from one day to the next are not very great, regardless of how you're allocating your resources. For example, if you're living with predators and your probability of dying on a day-to-day basis is very high, then what's predicted is that natural selection will favor the evolution of earlier maturity and increased reproductive effort. Those slices of the pie get bigger, then things like maintenance and growth get smaller, which means that by adapting to a high risk of mortality, you're taking away from your future, but the fact is you don't have much of a future anyway because you're living with predators and your chances of living from one year to the next are not very great regardless of how you're allocating your resources. And so that's one example of a prediction of life history evolution, but it also tells you the anticipated effects of predation go far more than camouflage. If you're asking how do animals adapt to predators, I'll be telling you today, and those adaptations are pervasive. They involve all features of the biology of the organism. Okay, the animals that I work on are guppies, and here we're looking at a male guppy and a female guppy. And important features include their sexual dimorphism. Males are very brightly colored, and they're highly polymorphic for color patterns. So if you catch 50 of them in a pond, no two are going to, or in a stream, I should say, no two will look alike. The females are actually nearly transparent. Males tend to be smaller than females. They're only about 15 millimeters long, and adult females 20 to 25 millimeters long. They have a short generation time. The time between when a female's born and when she first gives birth to young can be as little as 10 weeks. And the females give birth to live young. The young are like miniature adults, and that's a very important feature for the kind of work that I do, because it means that you can treat them just like adults, you can give them the same food, but it also means that the probability of survival from birth to adulthood is very close to 100% in a laboratory environment. And it means that I can sample guppies in nature and study them in lab and know that the lab samples that I'm working on are an unbiased representation of genetic variation in a natural population. If you work with egg layers, it's common to lose 90% of the offspring between when the egg is fertilized and adulthood. And what you'd have to worry about if you were doing experiments on them is whether or not the 10% that survive are a non-random 10%, where if in fact maybe you're selecting on the animals in the laboratory as you rear them to adulthood. And that's a problem that I don't have to deal with guppies. And the other thing about guppies is that they're, besides being good for lab studies, being hardy and fast and small, they're very good for doing field research on. The place where I do my field work is in Trinidad, which is actually a chip off of the northeastern shoulder of South America. It's a continental island, which means that at times it's been joined to the continent. And the fauna and flora that you see in Trinidad is a subset of what you would see in the neighboring areas of Venezuela.